Ал енді бастайық кешімізді.
Let's start our meeting. Good evening, everybody, colleagues. We appreciate for your interest to the conference on the media literacy for librarians. Today we have the representative of the Embassy of the United States, and this program is supported by the American corners of the American Embassy, and the representative Amber Conger is participating in our conference as well. Also, we have the representatives of the American Librarian Association, Director and International Chapter Relations Offices, American Library Association, Michael Dowling. We are glad to meet you today. Also, I would like to introduce the speakers of our meeting, Amber Conger. She has served as a library administrator since 2015. In 2017, Amber was elected president of the SC Library Association. In 2018, SC outstanding named outstanding librarian SC, and received the Information of Science Alumni Innovators Award. She has served in several advisory roles with the Public Programs Office of the American Library Association. Kristen Calvert serves as the Central District Manager for Dallas Public Library in Dallas. She has worked in multiple facets of public library service over the past 10 years. And also she manages Eric Johnson's Central Library, including leading programming efforts and training staff. She also has worked as a media literacy stakeholder with the American Library Association and trained library workers in media literacy principles. Also, we have the translators and interpreters who will be interpreting our meeting into English from Russian and Kazakh, and also from English into Kazakh and Russian, such as Anna Kabardina, Daurin Borabayev, and Jalgas Altunbekov. I would like to give the floor to the representative of the Embassy of United States in Kazakhstan, Amber Ora. Please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Bibigul, and a warm welcome to all. Oh my goodness, now it's like 670 participants. I hope, Bibigul, before I get going, everyone's using interpretation. It's good? Okay, хорошо. So to all, good evening. For the Kazakhstanis, good morning to our American colleagues, and welcome to all the librarians, to our American Spaces partners, and my American colleagues who are joining us from the American Library Association. As Bibigul mentioned, my name is Amber Ora. I am the Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Astana. And it is my pleasure to welcome everyone. It looks like some people maybe are not in the interpretation mode. Should I pause for a minute so they can do that? Yeah.
Бізге тіркелген мамандардың саны 1082 болды. Енді қазір
we have more than 1,000 participants, but now we have only 700 of them.
Okay. Was an announcement made so they know how to use the interpretation option?
иә, барлығына инструкция берілді. Хабарлама ауызша да инструкция ретінде де хат та жіберілді.
Извините,
Yes,
Бибигуль, нам
everybody
было,
received the
может быть,
notification
стоит
and the
подсказать, чтобы
information
выбрали
about the
язык.
interpretation function in Zoom meeting.
В том, что мы всем разослали инструкцию на казахском, русском языке, инструкцию по выбору языка на телефоне
So
мобильном.
we have sent everybody instructions about how to choose their translation channel, but I will repeat
colleagues,
those instructions one more
in order
time.
to choose the interpretation
They also have
language, you need to
the instructions
on
right
the,
now in the chat.
Button where you can find the interpreting functions on your screens. In the bottom of your screens, you have such a function, and you can choose the language in which you want to hear the interpreting. And if you have any questions, you can write it into the chat panel in the Zoom meeting, and then you will receive the information about the question that you asked about.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to COVID, I know this can be a challenge with most virtual meetings, so better to get it taken care of early, I hope. So again, let me just welcome everyone to this opening workshop of the Media Literacy Program being offered by our very dear partner, the Pushkin Library in Oskimien. I would especially like to thank the Oskimien Library for organizing this 8-week media literacy virtual workshop with the American Library Association. Now, we from the U.S. Embassy in Kazakhstan are really happy to be supporting this project, but you might be asking, why media literacy training? Well, we believe that media literacy helps boost all of our resilience to dis and misinformation. Of media literacy is hard information. Through media literacy training, we can actively learn how to consider the origin of information, the viewpoint or motivation of the source, and we can learn how to double check, fact check, check the sources. And we believe that the public is best served when thinking critically about our own assumptions and biases as readers and how information campaigns may be trying to manipulate the public. So we hope that through this workshop, Kazakhstani librarians will learn from their American counterparts and peers different skills and techniques to verify and assess online and traditional news sources, strengthen your critical thinking skills and your media literacy skills. We are counting on you that by the end of this training, one, that you'll stick through the training and capture all the information as it's presented, but two, and most importantly, that you're able to share what you've learned with your patrons and with others in your communities. In addition to our colleagues from the American Library Association, we're hoping to be able to connect you through these sessions with others who have participated in our programs from the US mission. That includes some of our teachers and English teaching assistants. As you're going through these trainings, we ask you to be thinking about how you will apply this in your own professional lives, in your libraries, in your communities. And I very much look forward to joining you and hearing, especially towards the end, how you anticipate implementing what you're learning in your sphere. So thank you with that for joining this workshop. Again, a huge thanks to our colleagues from the US and all of you who are taking extra time out of your busy schedules to join this project. Thank you.
Рахмет, Эмбер Хану.
Thank you very much, Miss Amber. Here, I would like to thank the representative of the American American State Department of State for the support in implementation of this program, and we have a lot of representatives of our libraries from our regions in Kazakhstan, approximately more than 700 of them participating right now, and I think that they will have benefit from this meeting as well. The next floor is given to the Director of International Chapter Relations of Office American Library Association, Michael Dowling. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bibigol, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it's past your regular work time, but again, and we know this is a critical topic of global reckoning, I guess I would say, that we have all been dealing with for a number of years. And it's critical that libraries play an important role in helping our public understand how to sift through and be critical of media information that they're receiving and from social media, from regular media, et cetera. I'm so pleased for the grant to be provided by the American Embassy. I want to thank Amber Ara and her colleagues for supporting this program and libraries throughout Kazakhstan. We really do appreciate that. I want to thank Bibigol and her staff and everybody else for all of their effort in pulling this together. It's a huge project. And I want to thank my two colleagues in the US who are going to be doing the presentations here. I want to thank Kristen and Amber. They're great colleagues and presenters, and you're going to have a great experience here, but definitely ask questions. They're very interested in hearing what your questions might be. And I know you're all ready to get to it, so I'll finish there. And again, just if you need us, we're here at the American Library Association for you. Thank you.
Рахмет, Michael.
Thank you very much, Michael. Today, for your support for today's project. Thank you very much again. Dear colleagues, the official part of our meeting is due to the end, and the next floor I would like to give to the speakers of our meeting, but because some of the participants are still to be to come to our meeting, maybe we will wait for a few minutes. What do you think about it?
Okay, I think I'm up now. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. Let me get my screen up here. Okay, how do we look? All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And it's truly an honor to be here today presenting with Kristen through the U.S. Embassy American Corners Program and on behalf of the American Library Association Public Programs Office. Thank you so much for inviting us. It is morning for me and Kristen. It's 8 a.m. for me and 7 a.m. for her. And I'm in South Carolina in the southern U.S. Today we are expecting sunshine. It'll be about 24 degrees Celsius, which is a little warm for us. We're in the middle of the Christmas holiday season. And it's funny because every year we put up snowman decorations. And in the South, we don't get snow on Christmas, but we hope to. So maybe this will be our year. Maybe you all could send us a little, perhaps. So here is an overview of what we'll be talking about today. I will begin with some background about media literacy, and we'll show you research that will demonstrate exactly why media literacy skills are critical for us to work toward addressing with our patrons. And after I share, Kristen will then be telling you about some ideas and techniques that she's found and implemented at her library for integrating media literacy skills into existing programs and services. So after Kristen and I spoke with Bibigal and learned about the goals of this presentation, we talked with each other about what information we should share from our original presentation, which was developed for American librarians. We both sought to learn as much as we could about the media landscape in Kazakhstan so we could use that knowledge to discern what would be most helpful for you. However, we quickly found that it was difficult for us to know which sources we should trust, and if what we were finding was updated or unbiased or otherwise presenting an accurate and current picture of what your librarians might be experiencing. So we definitely understand the challenges that our patrons face with media literacy. So what we decided would help you the most is that I will share with you as much as I can about the American media situation from our perspective as librarians. And then Kristen will share about the library programming that she and her team have created that serves as a model for libraries across the US. Then once you have an understanding of the challenges that we face here and why we have chosen to address them in the ways that we have, you can compare this information with the needs of your communities, pull out what you think might be successful, and apply it to your work. There's a possibility that we will offer examples which would not work in your country because of cultural differences or other limitations, but we believe that these examples would still be valuable for you. We hope that you'll talk with each other about what you hear today and that your conversations will lead you to create new ideas together about how best to serve your communities. You know your people and culture in ways that Kristen and I never will, and we see and appreciate your expertise regarding the best ways to serve the people of Kazakhstan. So to help you understand how we have approached media literacy challenges in the US, I first want to openly explain the culture surrounding media consumption here. Helping our patrons to responsibly consume information is a challenge for us too, and it seems to grow more difficult every year since I entered the library field in 2008. Media sources in the US are independent and they are not sponsored by the government. However, many news outlets, such as TV stations, newspapers, magazines, websites, they have become increasingly polarized and labeled as either liberal or conservative in accordance with the two main political parties in the US. So in this picture here, you see logos for many of our popular news sources and how they rank from liberal to conservative, from left to right. And the divide between the goals and values of the two parties seems to grow wider every year. And the culture and attitudes surrounding regular media have also changed significantly in the past 7 or 8 years. There's more suspicion around the media and more blatant rejection of facts and numbers that are presented to the public. There's also an increase in what they call fake news, where false articles or social media posts are created and shared widely, which creates a lot of confusion among readers. From my perspective, an organization that does not promote conservative opinions or stories is frequently labeled as liberal, even if it presents facts without opinions and does its best to maintain neutrality. I live in a very conservative area of the country, and this is what I see with our patrons very often. As librarians, It is challenging to help patrons under these conditions. While most people are open to learning, some others will question and doubt any answer that doesn't fit with what they want to hear or doesn't come from a source that they already know aligns with their views. So here's an example. In the US, many people were resistant to the COVID vaccine and they refused to take it. My experiences with patrons, which were later confirmed by data from the National Library of Medicine, showed that people's openness to the vaccine tended to align with the political party they were a member of. So this is from my local hospital. They initially encouraged the community to take the vaccine, but they received so many complaints that they changed their strategy. They simply started posting daily numbers of how many people were sick in the hospital and what those patients' vaccination status was. And this is one of their Facebook posts where the green numbers on top represent 15 people in the hospital who were sick with COVID and who had received vaccines. And then the purple numbers represent 161 people who were sick and did not receive the vaccine. And even with these numbers from our hospital posted every day that showed the consequences of the decision not to vaccinate, the vaccination rate in my community was still very low. People did not want to trust the data from a neutral source in their community, and it didn't align with their political views. So I share this with you not to convince anyone to get a vaccine, but to give you an example of the climate in the US regarding the influence of one's political party on their willingness to accept and learn new information. Excuse me, I'm sorry I'm coughing. I'm getting over a cold. We'll get through this though, it'll be good. All right. 85% of American adults own a smartphone, and internet access is widely available to anyone with a smartphone, home internet connection, or public internet connection like a library. And social media is extremely popular in the US. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are the most widely used platforms here. And it is not unusual to hear of people spending hours of their time on social media every day. Because the internet is so accessible, social media has become the place where information is shared and exchanged among anyone who wants to participate. Very little information exchange here is considered illegal, although strong protections do exist to protect children from pornography, and copying others' creative works is illegal, although penalties are not strongly enforced. All right, how about our libraries? US public and school librarians today are also facing an unprecedented level of complaints from people who object to books that we have in our collections. According to the American Library Association, who tracks US book challenges, most challenges are about books that are related to the experiences of Black, gay, lesbian, or transgender people. And this is difficult for librarians here because offering materials that represent all the people in our community is one of our core values. We support people's freedom to read and to choose what's best for themselves and their families. And US librarians have traditionally enjoyed a trusted and respected role in their communities. However, this also seems to be shifting. Public libraries and public school libraries are funded by taxes, and now more and more people who disagree with books in library collections are attempting to withhold library funding unless the books are removed. Several libraries in my state of South Carolina have been pressured to remove books or lose funding, and some elected officials have attempted to eliminate funding for all libraries in South Carolina for if we had books that supported views that they didn't like. It is critical for libraries to maintain updated collection development policies that establish and follow objective standards to guide what we will and will not purchase. Thankfully, my library has been okay so far and hasn't lost anybody, but we know that could change at any time. We cannot please everyone, yet we want to retain the public's trust, and we are all trying hard to find the right balance with that. So I know this was a lot of information about the conditions that U.S. librarians are currently working within when it comes to how our patrons view the media and libraries. The ideas that we will offer you were created with these challenges in mind. Our librarians have plenty of the challenges, and we are working to solve them. And we don't have all the answers yet, but we're trying. So let's change direction now and move into a discussion more about media literacy. And I want to thank Amber, the other Amber, for her wonderful summary of media literacy, right on the ball. So what exactly is media literacy? There are many different definitions, but we like this one from the U.S. National Association for Media Literacy Education. They define it as the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So that's very broad, right? So let's make it smaller. If we consider the traditional definition of literacy, what do we usually think of? Reading, right? We are librarians. But what is it that we're actually doing when we read? Literacy is the ability to encode and decode symbols in order to receive and analyze messages. So media literacy is that same ability, but it's applied beyond just the letters on the page of a book. When someone has media literacy skills, it means that they are capable of analyzing messages across all platforms, including electronic, print, and artistic visuals. Someone can look at a website, a commercial, a video, a newspaper, and be prompted to think about who created it and what their intention is. And it's really important that I mention here that advocating for media literacy skills for our patrons is a non-political effort. Nothing about this is pro-media or anti-media movement. The National Association for Media Literacy Education, they are a group of concerned people from many disciplines: educators, faith-based groups, consumer groups, healthcare providers. Those are just some of the groups that have joined together because they recognize the need for improvement in how we as a nation understand media. So why are we talking about this now? In the US, we now live in a media-saturated society where absolutely anyone can create content and post it online. And it wasn't that long ago when we had fewer news sources and it was easier to determine where we were getting our information and what the source's reputation was. But it's not that easy anymore with the internet. And we can see the effects of people's inability to question the creator of a message and to question the creator's intent. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. So now that we've defined what media literacy is, why exactly is it important? Maybe it will be easier if I ask you the question in reverse. In what ways could a lack of media literacy skills have a negative impact on a person or a community? So I'll ask you again, in what ways could a lack of media literacy skills be harmful to a person or a community? And I'll give you a moment to think about it while I grab a sip of my water. Okay. So some things I have thought about are an adverse effect on health, as I already mentioned about the vaccines. You know, the wrong information could cause someone to make choices that could be deadly. Relationships. I don't know about you all, but it's really hard sometimes to talk with family and hear them angry or stressing about some crazy thing that they read online that isn't even true. We have some interesting discussions about that. Finances, there are problems everywhere here. Believing poor financial advice, the effects of ads. There are so many ways for people to lose money if they don't know how to question what they're reading. How many of you have been in the position of assisting a patron who was believing a scam, and you had to be the one to tell them that what they were looking at was not legitimate? I saw this a lot on my days when I worked at a reference desk. And one that's on a lot of people's minds lately is civic and community engagement. Media literacy skills are essential to democracy, the American form of government. These skills allow us to free our minds, make our own judgments and choices, and express ourselves effectively. We could go on, but overall, yes, media literacy skills are essential to becoming a successful student, a competent consumer, a responsible citizen, and so on. So if you're wondering why I put in a picture of a shopping cart, there was a discussion on social media some time ago where someone had a theory about whether or not you returned a shopping cart to the corral was an indicator of whether or not you were a good person. The idea was if you put the cart back, it does a lot of good for other people, although you may not necessarily benefit from it. But here in the US, sometimes people will leave their carts free in the parking lots where they roll into other people's cars, which is not good. And the theory was that a good person puts the cart back in the proper place simply because it's the right thing to do. And it was an interesting thought experiment, so you can look it up if you're curious. So I like to think that having good media literacy skills is one of many factors in life that helps you grow into becoming a conscientious and responsible and empathetic person, like the kind of person who would put the cart back. It benefits everyone when the people around us have good media literacy skills. We have a stronger and happier community when people are accurately informed and when they can use that information to make wise decisions. So there are a lot of ways that I could show you that we have room to improve on the media literacy front. For example, we could compare news articles for bias or test ourselves to see if we can tell the difference between a real Twitter user and a fake account. But let's take a look at this angle of media literacy. Let's connect the news sources our patrons use with the amount of accurate knowledge that they actually have. So I pulled a lot of data from a reputable research study conducted 3 years ago about how US adults receive their political news. And this was important because if we don't understand where our users are coming from, it's hard for us to design solutions to meet their needs and solve the problem. And so I'm going to share this with you to give you insight about what we see here. And perhaps you can find similar studies in Kazakhstan, you may already have them, that you can use to help you understand where your patrons receive their news. Okay, so here are our main news sources in the US. On the left, we have television, of course. There's 3 types of television that were studied. There's cable TV, which people have to pay for if they want it. Network TV, which is national channels, and that's free. And then local TV, which is in your community. Bottom left corner, we have social media. A lot of people receive their political, we're going to talk about political news with this study. So the bottom left corner represents social media. At the top, we have online news and websites. Right-hand side, radio. And then on the bottom right, we have our print, which is newspapers and magazines. So which of these political news sources would be most popular where you live? I'm going to share with you what the study showed is most popular in the US. Okay. So in the US, adults here, 18% of them receive their political news from social media. A lot of it's Facebook and Twitter. That's probably the strongest ones there. About half receive their news from some kind of TV. And then we have about a 25% online. They look at news websites and such. And then the rest are radio and print resources. But this doesn't tell us the whole picture, right? Because we serve patrons of many different ages. So that is where we're going next. So the study also broke down the questions about where do you get your news from? And they asked 18 to 29-year-olds, 30 to 49-year-olds, 50 to 64-year-olds, and then the seniors, 65 plus. So think for a moment about how it may be different with these different age groups about where they receive their news. Do you think that they all use the same sources, or that they use different ones depending on what their age is? Okay. So here's what we have going on here. So the young people are on social media mostly. Half of them receive their news from their political news from social media, and then about 20% more from a news website. And then they're not really watching TV that much. Some of them are listening to the radio. And then you see the social media use going down the older you get. The 30 to 49-year-olds and the 50 to 64-year-olds have the most diverse options. But you see that the social media use is growing, the online use is growing, a few more TV watchers there, and a lot of radio. And then we get down to the older generations and look at how many people are looking at print news. There are almost half of our senior citizens are using newspapers and magazines. And they're watching a lot of cable television, which cable television in the US has channels that tend to lean liberal or conservative, and people tend to pick one, not everyone, but a lot of people choose a side and that's where they stay. So take a moment to look at this. Are there any trends here that surprise you about the US or that you think might be different where you live? I was surprised by radio's popularity among 30 to 49-year-olds until I thought about it a little more and realized these are probably the moms and dads who are driving their children to all of their activities and that sort of thing. I noticed that the 50 to 64-year-olds had the most diversity in their format choices, although I would have expected more social media use from that group. And I'd be interested to see if there's an updated study that would reflect more usage of that, because it seems like there's a lot more older people on Facebook now than there used to be. And one that didn't surprise me, but it's definitely something to think about, is here, print news is steadily declining. Many newspapers and magazines are closing down, and they're changing to online only if they even exist at all. So there's a lot of change going on with how our media is shared with people who read it. And so those are things that we have to think about as librarians as we develop our collections and as we think about how to reach our community. Okay, last one. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Which users have the most political knowledge and the least political knowledge as far as what is accurate, what they're learning that's actually happened? The same study, excuse me, gave all of these users a test to see who was the most politically knowledgeable. to see if there was any connection between the way someone got their news and what they actually knew about it. So what do you think the connections might be for Kazakhstan? So the primary result in the US, the arrow pointing up is those are the people who knew the most. Middle political knowledge is average, and then obviously the down arrows, they had low political knowledge. And the people who understood and knew the most about the news used online, they used news websites. There's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe, it's the most updated, and that played into the study. Radio, the radio listeners had very high political knowledge also, almost as much as the website readers. And then print sources. Now our print sources are, our standard newspapers and magazines that tend to go through a lot of fact checking. So that explains that one there. But then the thing here that concerns me the most is about social media. Only 17% of people who primarily receive their news from social media had high political knowledge, but most of them really don't know what they're talking about. So this is a little troubling. So the primary result in the US is that, the younger generations are relying the most on social media, but they're also the most misinformed. And this is troubling, right? Wouldn't we want to see the opposite to be true when we consider who is going to be guiding our country in the future? I was hoping that the younger generation would be more informed because they've been in school and they've been learning how to use the internet, and older users didn't have that kind of formal instruction. So I'm finding that, the problem is different than I thought it was before I learned more about our users' habits. So how can we help as librarians? The studies that connect media sources with political knowledge confirm that media literacy skills are more important than ever. And it's not just anecdotal that those who rely on social media for news are less informed. The statistics confirm it. I hope you can see why it's important that we make every effort to understand our users. We cannot design effective solutions when we aren't sure of the nature of the problem. I encourage you to do all that you can to learn about your patrons' media consumption. You might find some surprises, which will help you as you develop effective services and programs to improve media literacy in your community. Our technology is changing daily. It's harder to keep up with it, and it's easier to be deceived than ever before. So how can we help? I will now pass to Kristen to lead us into the next portion of our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hey everybody. We are going to do a quick switch of screen sharing. So, one moment. Okay. Thank you, Amber. Always love hearing you explain the media landscape. Okay. And so hi, I'm Kristen. It's so nice to be with you this morning and really excited about sharing this with you. Like Amber said, I'm gonna talk to you about what we've been doing in libraries here to try to combat misinformation and disinformation. So the first place that we can do this is at the reference desk, and then we're gonna talk about programs, displays, and also training staff, students, partners. And so one of the biggest things for me, because I gave portions of this training and some of what Amber talked about to staff at Dallas Public Library, to all of our public service staff. And a thing that came up was with reference desk interactions is why that's important and how media literacy relates to information literacy and how we can share and help kind of end those hard conversations that people have. So traditionally, libraries have always been about information literacy, helping people get the right information to meet their needs. And media literacy is a part of this. Finding the right information and providing access to that information is what we're about as librarians. So media literacy involves utilizing critical thinking skills to evaluate the purpose and impact of information, and media literacy builds upon the foundation of traditional literacy and critical thinking skills. Basically, you can't have media literacy without information literacy, and we can teach customers media literacy skills in the interactions we're already having. So let's talk through some of these different interactions. First, at the reference desk. So I've had multiple interactions with my time as a librarian where somebody comes to me and brings to me something that is definitely not true, and they bring it to me as fact, or they have a question about something that the roots kind of stem from an area of misinformation or disinformation. And fake news and misinformation often have plausible roots in truth. Sometimes they're even like deliberately created to get people believing something, and they get shared really quickly, especially on social media. But we have an opportunity as librarians to step in and help people find the correct information or help bring them back to real information. So in case you can't read it, I'll tell you what my slides say here. At the reference desk, you have an informal teaching setting, and media literacy offers an opportunity to deflect from sharing your own opinion. So if somebody, like I've had people come up to me at the reference desk and say things like about whoever the current president of the United States is, and it's really wanting me to agree with their opinion. Like, I just feel really bad for them and everything they're going through. Don't you think so? Or something like that, like off a question. And instead of deflecting and saying something like, we don't talk about politics here, I can ask them questions to get them on the right path to good information and see what kind of news sources they're using. And it's important, if you're doing this, to be ready to address why the patron thinks their information source is reliable and how that's determined. And having resources ready is a big part of this. For me, those are things like the Center for Media Literacy, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, something like we have a website called snopes.com that you can fact check quick things on. So finding sites like that work for you might help if you're combating a misinformation at the desk. Okay, so we're going to run through a few scenarios here, and I'm going to read them to you in case you can't read my slides. And we're going to talk about, I want you guys to think about for a few minutes how you would answer them, and then I will talk about the different things we have here. So the first one, if somebody came up to you at the reference desk and said something like, how could anyone possibly vote for President Camacho? So there are a lot of ways you could answer this. And like I said before, one of them that you might immediately go to is, we don't talk about politics. Can I answer a question for you? But that is not the best way to give somebody information on media literacy, which they might need at this point if they're sharing a political opinion with you. So some examples of what you can say are, I've been hearing a lot about this. Would you like me to help you find some information on this subject? I can tell you feel strongly about this. Have you found specific outlets to help you shape your opinion? And that's a great question. Have you seen this resource on the topic? So any of these answers give you an opportunity to keep the conversation going and steer it towards media literacy. Okay, next question. Do you have any books on spiders? I'm concerned about one that may hide in my toilet seat and bites when you sit down. Look at this Facebook post I saw. And this is a real question I was asked once at a reference desk. So that's why I put it in here. And at first I saw this and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. What a thing to have to worry about all the time when you're using the restroom, you know? And then I thought about it a little more and I'm like, there is no possible way that this is the first time in my life I have heard about this spider. It's terrifying. So then I looked it up online and I found a few different websites that showed, that this was in fact a fake news source. So what you can say in this case is let's take a look at this and try to find the source. Knowing the source might help us determine if it's biased or even false. And this also gives you an opportunity to go into some other pieces of media literacy. Like if you're unfamiliar with a source and wondering if it's credible, you can look at things like who owns the news outlet, how it's funded. You can look at for us, we have Pew Research which is just like a national nonpartisan research bureau where you can see things like trusted sources of media information or which sites are less biased and things like that. Okay, this is my last reference question here. My child is spending a lot of time online and I'm concerned what they're looking at isn't representative of the values I want them to grow up with. So this is a really valid concern that we've only had for a very short period of time in the history of the world. We have kids using the internet now, and that wasn't even something that happened when I was a kid. And so thinking about what that's doing to their brain and what they're looking at, these are all questions parents have, and we don't have a lot of ways to give them this answer on this big scale at this point. So with anyone in the world able to easily create and upload content to the internet, it's important for you and your child to understand where the content they are watching is coming from. Let's look at how you can learn and teach your child how to evaluate what they're looking at online. So, great way to answer this. It gives you an opportunity to talk through these things with your child and teach the parent the media literacy skills as well. Okay, so moving away from the reference desk and moving into displays and passive program ideas, this is a picture of a display idea, critical thinkers, and then it has real or fake news with different news pieces, and people can look at them and determine whether they're real or fake and, think through what makes them think that. This is a great way to engage customers to explore their own media literacy skills where you don't have to be as hands-on. And displays make a great teaching tool. Just make sure that you're supplementing with resources that explain media literacy. QR codes are something that became really popular in the United States during the pandemic. If you guys, I don't know, the little barcode that you scan with your phone and it takes you to a website. So that gives us a way to add a lot of additional information to a display and take people to sound information online versus having a lot of information on like one sheet of paper or something that somebody might not read here. And it's something people can take with them too. Okay. This is another great display / program idea to create your own newspaper. So there in the United States, there are very close ties between local media, trust, and believing in like alternate theories of reality, conspiracy theories, or fake news. We have a huge concern right now on both a national and very individual level with people believing things that are just completely untrue because they've heard them so many times. And especially with social media and things like that, you get stuck in an echo chamber and you hear the same ideas repeated, and eventually your brain starts to believe they're true. So there's a huge tie between having local media in your community and not believing these fake ideas about the world. So we explored that a little bit with our library, with a partner organization where we created our own newspaper. And this was a partnership through a local media outlet. And it helps, in doing these kind of things, help build trust between these consumers and the media, and give the opportunity to think about media literacy skills. What we did was we had customers kind of write their own news articles with the help of the media representatives who were there. And we printed it and we used an old newspaper box to display. We kept it out at a park for a little while, and then it moved into our library, where you can still get issues of this newspaper. So this just helped us highlight the importance of local media and gave the opportunity to talk about the media ownership and other principles that come into play. And we found that when working with bigger media literacy organizations, one thing that we talk about a lot is rebuilding trust between the media and individuals, because that's something that's really fallen off in the United States. And if people don't trust the things that are giving them real information and factual information, then they're going to look for that information elsewhere, which is where a lot of the fake news and intentional disinformation come into play. Okay. To talk about less passive programs, first we'll talk about some ongoing programs that you all might already have at your libraries, such as book clubs, movie screenings or discussions, technology classes, or makerspace programs. This can be a much more effective approach to programming and putting in media literacy skills than programs that are created specifically to teach media literacy, like a traditional workshop like we're having now. In our libraries, we found that time after time, we can see customers need something. We can see that they really, really need, they come up and ask questions all the time about the same thing over and over again. We get a lot of questions about, how do I make an email address? Or I really need help with this resume. I need help filling out this job application, things like that, very real things. So we're like, oh, we see that people need this. Let's offer them this great service. Let's have a program about making a great job application. How do you fill out a job application? So you have the program and nobody comes. You've answered 60 reference questions about this in the last 3 months, but nobody comes to your program. And talking to people about it, we realized that a lot of times we recognize that somebody needs something because they've asked us the question, but they don't recognize that they need that information. Or they need it in that one specific moment where they need help filling out a job application. They don't need it after they've already gotten the job. You've already helped them fill out the job application. So a lot of times those programs that are specifically dedicated to realizing a very real skill, people don't come to them. And media literacy is the same in a lot of ways. So I like to use the example of my father in this. He will tell you that he has these skills. He looks at both sides of the media, because we have very conservative and very liberal media, and he comes to his own opinion. And so he has media literacy skills. He definitely would not benefit from a media literacy program or anything that Amber and I were talking about. He already knows. And then I will talk to him about something political, and he'll tell me, one time, for instance, we were talking and he told me about this program we have for immigrants that are illegally crossing our borders, that once they get into the United States, they are given thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in all of these different services that we don't even offer to legal citizens who are here and might also need the same things. It's just for those who are coming over illegal. And I started thinking, and I was like, man, if that is true, then I might agree with him. And so I looked it up, and it didn't take me long to find the information. But this thing that he was telling me, what came from a Facebook post that was shared over and over and over again, and was just completely incorrect information that was disseminated. So then I was able to like look into what we actually do when somebody crosses the border and give him all of that information, etc. But the point is, he thinks as an individual, he's looking at both sides, and he's definitely not one to believe fake news that he saw on social media. But then when we talk about it, I hear constant examples of how he is doing this. He is getting his information from these fake news sources without even recognizing it. And you guys will learn more about how that works and how our brain takes in that information, why it's so easy that it happens in the future webinars. So anyway, the point is, my dad, he definitely needs to learn media literacy. He definitely wouldn't come to a library program on media literacy, but he might come to a book club, or he might come to a movie screening, or he might even come to a different kind of tech class. So if we can integrate media literacy principles into these programs that we're already having, then we're going to be much more successful in teaching them than doing a one-off media literacy workshop where we're teaching people just simple media literacy skills. Okay, so book club screenings and discussions. You can relate something that's happening in a book to current events in how the media is portraying that. And that's a great way to bring in media literacy principles. And just asking questions related to the media and the portrayal and how different people process that are a good way to get people thinking critically here. Tech classes are another great way, and I strongly believe that if you are teaching a basic class on how to use the internet for the first time, or have an email account, or how to use social media, then you should be teaching media literacy skills as a great part of this. The picture here is Spider-Man, American superhero. He's saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's true with the internet. If we're giving people the tools to connect and access and to consume online, and giving people access to all of that information, then it's important to discuss media literacy just like you would something like internet safety. Talk to people about trusted sources of information. And as somebody, especially with social media, it's important to discuss the responsibility of the creator. Because if somebody is using social media, they can easily share something that's not true without thinking about where it's coming from. And teaching things like information bias, curation, and even creating responsibly are also really important here. So take the time to take that extra step if you have a tech class to talk to people about this as well. Okay, so digital citizenship class is another opportunity. When I was growing up, we did not have the internet at home. We didn't have cell phones or smartphones or anything like that. So even up into when I was in high school and college, and things like cell phones and laptops and dial-up internet started to become more prevalent, we still didn't know at that point what all of this freedom of information and access to information was doing to our brains. And now we have this opportunity here where we can teach these skills in school. We can start teaching them and get people thinking critically about how they're consuming information and media at an early age. So this is a great opportunity to teach these skills, something like a digital citizenship class. And many of our schools in the United States are starting to offer these classes a lot of times in the library in school. So as people use the internet and get online and things like that, they have an opportunity to learn basic media literacy skills, internet safety, and other digital skills. And this is a strong foundation for youth to build on. And it could be something that there's the potential to add at multiple levels, like in universities as well, and even potentially through a public library setting. Another thing, this is not really a program, but that we've been able to do in libraries is to set people up for success, essentially, is to use a browser plugin like NewsGuard is something that we can easily add to internet browsers here. So if somebody is searching for information, it comes up and it tells you like if the information is from a trusted source or if it's something that isn't trusted. And it just gets people thinking about it a little bit more if they're browsing the internet at the library by themselves. Okay, so to talk more about programming, we're going to talk about some traditional program ideas and some non-traditional program ideas for media literacy. And when I say traditional program, I'm thinking about programs that we often have at libraries where our thought is to educate, to really like broaden a worldview in some way, where we have multiple people, like a panel talking about something, or you would maybe have an author get up and talk. You can do the same thing with media literacy principles. Partnering with local journalists or other media representatives to teach workshops on media literacy or have a panel discussion. This gives customers the opportunity to learn informally from media experts. A bipartisan nonprofit group can play a significant role in hosting or connecting for programs like these. We've had a really strong partnership at Dallas Public Library with PEN America over the last few years, where they've hosted webinars and workshops for us. They've hosted, I think they've come to the library, well, they did 2 online workshops during the COVID-19 pandemic, and they've come to the library and talked to us in person twice. And the in-person workshop was not very well attended, which again, like I was talking about before, even though we had this great national partner who came, from very far away to talk to people, we did a tremendous job marketing and getting it out to people that we thought would be interested. We did not have a lot of success with people attending this. And it was, even with a recognized name and things like that. So I think there were other ways that we could have potentially had this program that might have had a bigger audience. One of those I was thinking about was if we had made it more of a like closed door program versus an open to the public program, where we invited like key leaders and stakeholders to come in and talk, and for them to think critically about media. And also part of it is always that rebuilding trust with media, or to even build trust between leaders and the media, can be really beneficial. So if I did this one again, that's probably the way I would go, than to do a workshop that's open to the public for people to come into. So I think just the opportunity to get people in a room together, get them talking, will increase that shared understanding and mutual respect. And a public library setting or even an academic setting is a great place to host this, because we are thought of as that like kind of cornerstone of democracy, bringing people together sort of place. So I'm a huge believer in non-traditional programs to sneakily teach people media literacy skills. And so we're talking to talk about getting creative and creating a safe place for people. Sometimes non-traditional programs work better. Sneak media literacy concepts into fun programs and create a welcoming environment. Libraries are all about being welcoming and open and engaging to everybody. So this is really important to me. So what programs do work for you right now? That's where I start when I start thinking about how to talk about media literacy skills. And if you can find a way to bring media literacy principles into those programs, then you are likely to have more success with teaching media literacy to the people who are coming into your libraries. So I'm going to go through a couple examples of things that worked well for us to get you thinking about what will work for you. The first one is the most recent thing we've done. It's a disinformation crime scene. True crime is a genre of literature that is very popular in the United States. True crime, if you're not familiar with the term, basically means stories of real murders or real people scamming other people, things like that. So this is just something that over the last few years that has become extremely, extremely popular here. People love listening to podcasts on it. They love shows, they love books. And we found this to be true even for library programming. So if your library is like mine, something we always worry about is, will anybody come to this program? If we put a lot of money or a lot of resources into something, are people going to actually show up and come to it? So this last summer, we had a true crime mini convention at our downtown library location. We had a whole day of true crime authors. We had the kickoff of a true crime book club. We had a crime scene that people solved at the end, and people loved it. I mean, we had so many people signing up for this thing, and they came in, they looked through clues, and they solved the murder. So we thought about this more, and I was trying to think of ways that we could think about true crime and the popularity. And we were leading up to midterm elections, national elections in the United States. And I wanted to have something on media literacy before we moved into the election. So we thought about it, we talked about it, and we came up with the idea that we should have another crime scene program, but we are going to make the clues intentionally point in the wrong direction in order to demonstrate the harm that misinformation and disinformation can do. So basically, instead of having clues that lead you to the murderer, we had clues that intentionally led you in the wrong direction and made it really hard to solve the crime scene. And that was to illustrate media literacy principles, that if you don't have the right facts, that you're not going to draw the right conclusion, and you're going to start believing maybe something that isn't actually true. And we were able to have this program at multiple libraries in our library system. We have 30 libraries across the city of Dallas. So we had it all over Dallas, and we found it to be really well attended at all of the locations that we had the program at. And it was just really exciting for us because, again, it's sometimes very hard to get people to come to library programs, but to see a huge interest and be able to like sneak some media literacy skills in was just, it was awesome. Like it was the best. And it was really right before our elections are in November. So we had these in like September and October, and it was just tremendous timing, and the programs received really great feedback, and it taught people media literacy principles without making them sit and learn the definitions in a classroom. So I don't know if this is something that's really popular for you all, but there's probably something that you had at your library that you got really excited about because a lot of people came to it. So take that idea and think about it and find a way to just put media literacy into it. Okay, this is another one, and this is one of my very favorite things, the turquoise table. This is about creating community and getting people talking to each other. Beyond providing physical or virtual access to information and technology, libraries can encourage and facilitate conversations where community members exchange ideas and debate important questions. Public libraries are often considered limited public forums or spaces. In the United States, public libraries were originally thought of as a community gathering space as much as a place to access knowledge. And now when access to knowledge and information is happening in new ways besides through books or physical materials, we have an opportunity to really be that space for community engagement. People need that safe space to learn and talk to each other. So the turquoise table movement was something that was created outside of the libraries. It was actually created by a church. And the idea here is that people will put these turquoise, this very specific color of turquoise, in their yard, and or in the, like in a community gathering space like a library. And it's an opportunity for people to come sit down, sometimes like break bread or have a meal together and talk about things. And you can do this in a lot of really special ways where you're creating a conversation with people who might never have a conversation together, and you're helping them learn about each other. You can also do it with local media or something like that, where again, you're building that trust. And if you talk about media literacy long enough, you're going to get asked what to do when someone is deep into fake news and no longer believes mainstream news sources are real. And something that I heard that I really, really loved, and I think because I really like the idea of people coming together, and it made sense to me, but alienating and directly challenging is not going to do a lot of good. You're going to shut that person out. And what you want to do in these situations is bring people in instead of pushing them away. And this is where the turquoise table comes into play. And taking this community space and giving people the opportunity to talk to their neighbors can be really important. It can help increase empathy between different groups. It can help people better understand each other, and it can help bridge divides. Another example of how to do this is through a human library. We did human libraries last year as a part of a bigger program that I'm actually going to talk about in a few minutes. But human libraries are the idea that instead of checking out a book or a physical material, somebody can check out a person and they can sit down and talk to them. And again, this gives the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody that you wouldn't get to have that conversation with otherwise. So we had some really interesting folks come in for a part of our human library. And one lady was actually one of the librarians at one of our branch libraries, and she had grown up she's in her late 70s. And so she had grown up and seen quite a few different things and experienced things that you wouldn't expect somebody who has a modern professional career to have done. And she was able to share those experiences with quite a few members of her community. And there are in my city different neighborhoods that have a past that a lot of people who just moved here and things like that don't know about. So this gives an opportunity to teach those things and understand how the media comes into play and sharing that information as well. And just understanding how like underlying media literacy principles have an effect here can help you teach those principles through these programs as well. And you can have, if you're having a human library or if you're going to have a turquoise table, bring people in to be those community members to sit down and talk about those different things with people in a very informal way. And you're likely to build trust and help people bridge those divides. Okay. Just need a drink here. So explore urban legends, and I put in quote marks, fun conspiracy theories. Amber and I were working on this presentation. She's told me I need to explain urban legends and conspiracy theories in case you all don't use the same terms for them, which is a very valid point, and I hadn't thought about it. So urban legends, I did look, and you all have urban legends, but are things like that live only in legend. They're not necessarily real, but people have seen them so many times, or seen, a monster out in the woods or whatever so many times that it becomes a real thing in people's mind. And some people believe it and some people don't. And conspiracy theories are sort of the same in some ways, but in my mind, they are a lot more harmful because believing them, or any really urban legend to a huge degree, if that's what you're focusing all of your mind and your life on, can harm the way you are approaching the world and how you approach others as well. So some conspiracy theories that we have in the United States are affecting the way people look and think about politics, or the way that they look and think about their government or their neighbors even. But some of them don't at all. Or some urban legends that we have here, like the picture you have on the left side of the screen is Bigfoot and two of my library staff. And we were actually, we did a tour in 2020 when our libraries were still closed to the public for Halloween of our central library, where it was haunted. So we went through the whole library virtually and showed people the collections and stuff since they couldn't come in. And there were just different like urban legend monsters and things like that roaming the building during this. So here you have Bigfoot. I think there's a ghost in the back also, but this is something, Bigfoot, that all across the United States in different ways he's come about. People claim to have seen them. They've seen big footprints in the ground and things like that. And, you know, you can go to like a national park or something and get a, get a Bigfoot magnet or whatever, or look for him while you're there. And he has different names if you're in different places too. We actually had a speaker come to the library once though. And he was a Bigfoot expert. So he talked about Bigfoot and what he believed about it and things like that. But he was a very avid believer in Bigfoot. And so we were thinking about program ideas, again, around media literacy and what would be fun and what would get people engaging to come to and things like that. And the idea came up that we should have these people who represent these different urban legends here at the library all together, and they could talk about why they believe them, and we could tie that back to media literacy principles. But the more we thought about it, we realized that maybe that wasn't a great idea, because somebody who very avidly believes in Bigfoot enough to go to public libraries and talk about him is going to be very upset if you tell him that that's not real information and you're actually using him to teach media literacy skills to people. So we decided not to go that direction. But it is something that if you were talking about urban legends or folk tales or something like that in your library, you do have the opportunity to tie that back to media literacy principles in some way. Like we also had a program where we just shared media literacy principles. We had a program where we just shared folk tales with people. We had trained storytellers come in and share traditional stories. And this is how information was spread before we had print news or something like that. You know, people told stories to their children and they told them to their children, and the stories change over time. And that becomes a legend. It becomes a folktale that people continue to share as a part of the tradition of their family or of their heritage in some way. So that is an opportunity to, if you're sharing those kind of stories, to tie it back to media literacy. I also put on the other side here, birds aren't real. Birds Aren't Real is it's a fake conspiracy theory group that is in the United States. It's a parody group. We do have a big concern here right now with groups, like I said, believing things that just aren't true. Like we actually in Dallas had a group come who believed that one of our presidents who was assassinated many, many years ago was going to come back to life. And they all met at the monument. He was assassinated in Dallas. And they met at the monument in the area where this had happened. And they were waiting for him to come back because he was supposed to come back on a certain day. And this is troubling because so many people across the United States are believing it. And they're believing it really, truly in their hearts because of things like you're going to learn about in later webinars, like echo chambers and how social media works and how our brains process entertainment information versus news information and all of those sort of things. So birds aren't real is like one of these theories, but it's the people who founded it know that it's not real. And so the whole idea behind this is that birds don't exist and are really drone replicas installed by the US government to spy on Americans. Hundreds of thousands of young people have joined the movement wearing birds aren't real t-shirts, swarming rallies, and spreading the slogan. The creators of Birds Aren't Real and the movement's followers are in on a joke. They know that birds are, in fact, real and that their theory is made up. What Birds Aren't Real truly is, they say, is a parody social movement with a purpose. In a post-truth world dominated by online conspiracy theories, young people have coalesced around the effort to thumb their nose at, fight, and poke fun at misinformation. And for this reason, for us, Birds Aren't Real makes a great teaching tool and is also a good opportunity for libraries to connect and partner because they know that they're a parody already. They're not going to be offended if we bring them in and try to use them to teach media literacy or something like that. So looking at what people are believing, whether it's like a historical traditional belief that is not doing anybody harm in any way, or if it's something that is causing harm, looking at those things and finding a way, if it's something that's going to attract interest of a wide variety of people into your library where you can work in media literacy principles, that's somewhere that you also have an opportunity to teach these principles to people. And I hope that I made sense of all that. Okay, so to talk about what you can do a little bit beyond programming and is to work with staff and community partners. And what's important here is to know what media literacy is and why that's important. Training staff, like you guys are all doing this training now, is fabulous. But training staff on these principles so they understand them when they are at the reference desk, when they are looking at programming and things like that. And also, again, why it's important to share these ideas and having resources available and relating to partners' area of expertise. This is what you want to do as you're working with staff and community partners. So first, understand the concept yourself well enough to talk about it. Know how media literacy impacts your life and train staff like we're doing now. And I think training staff goes beyond just talking about what the principles are, because like I said, I trained all of our public service staff in our libraries on media literacy. And as beneficial as that was to everybody, if they don't understand why it's important to we talked about when we talked about reference desk interactions, we talked about how it's extremely beneficial to go beyond. If somebody says, they ask you a question that might be politically leaning, they even ask you a question about what you believe, instead of shutting down the conversation and saying, we don't talk about that here, I'm at work, I can't talk about politics, taking the conversation back to media literacy, that can be extremely beneficial. So somebody asks you who you voted for in the last election, say. Instead of giving the information and say, I can't share that information with you, which I have seen so many libraries do, and I'm sure that I've done at a reference desk in my time. Instead of doing that, you take the opportunity to ask, more questions or see where they got their information from or turn it to media literacy in some way. Well, that can become a really long conversation and it takes a lot of time. So staff need to understand why that's really important if they're going to do it. And it is important because fake news, misinformation, and disinformation are affecting the way a large part of people who vote, people who make decisions are approaching the world. So we need to, at every level that we can, have these conversations with people, help them start thinking critically about the way they're consuming information. And having resources available, so when you're explaining the difference between real news or fake news sources, you can hand the person that you're explaining it to something or show them something so they can take those tools home. And when they want to think critically about media literacy, they want to explore more what they're looking at on social media, they have the first step to be able to do that. And then when you're working with partner groups, partnerships are a really big thing for us here. We're constantly trying to find ways to, you know, connect with the community on a broader level. The public library is a very trusted, very neutral type place. And so people are always wanting to work with us, and we have a very broad reach as well. So look at your partners and the way that they're spreading this information or what they're about, and how you can further media literacy through your partner groups. And I have a great example that I'm going to share with you here. This is what the slide is about. We did a citywide read this year, and this is something we've done in the past as well. The program's called Big D Reads, and the idea is one book, one city. We get as many people reading the same book as possible, but the book has a purpose. So the one we read this year was a really big deal for the city of Dallas. The Accommodation, the Politics of Race in an American City. This book was originally written in the 1980s, and it was written using resources found at the public library, by the way. Have to point that out, of course. And it was about the politics of race in the city of Dallas. So it goes into the history of different neighborhoods and how groups of Black citizens were forced to move from one neighborhood to another neighborhood when they became upwardly mobile after we went through our civil rights movement and tried to give everybody the same rights, essentially, no matter the color of their skin. So this uncovered a lot of things that people didn't want to be uncovered. And for that reason, it was suppressed for years. It was originally supposed to be published and printed, and then it wasn't until I think last year. The first printing of this book came out since the early 80s. And that is something that is of huge significance in the United States right now as well, is book banning. People are trying to take books that they aren't comfortable with out of circulation in libraries. This is especially prevalent in school libraries. And I know Amber talked a little bit about this as well, but it's just hugely important to us. And it affects the way that we are able to give people information or have something available that's representative of all people. And so when this book came out and we read it as a city, we gave away 100,000 copies of this book essentially to people in the city of Dallas. And the community ties were huge. Like, we had people clamoring for copies of this book, and we were giving them out at all of our different libraries really quickly, and they were giving them out at other places as well. And through this program, which we had those human library events that I talked to you all about, we had specific media literacy workshops. We talked to members, community leaders. We had special events for them. We were able to tie in some media literacy principles. And a lot of the reason we were able to do that was because I was already thinking about that stuff because of the work I had done with the American Library Association. And this project was extremely important as well. So because I was thinking about those things and had been trained on these principles, I was able to bring it in on this broader level and to hopefully help other people start thinking about those things too, and the way that like media literacy skills even affect things like book bans and stuff like that. So libraries have an important role to play in the civic life of patrons. We provide access to government and immediate information and assist our patrons in analyzing and evaluating information. We're guided by the core values that we've always held: access, service, and intellectual freedom. And through Big D Reads, we were able to talk about the connection between book bans and disinformation. We were able to reach a huge group of the population, bring them to the library, and show them through history the harm of suppression and misinformation. And we'll have other opportunities to do these kind of things in the future as well. Right now, we are talking about what we can do next. You know, my staff want to do more crime scene programs. And for instance, so I've been telling them that I want them to think of new ways to share these principles too, to get creative, think about what people are interested in and how to bring them in their door and tie that back to media literacy principles. I also think that there's a ton of opportunity through these community engaging programs like the Turquoise Table, like Human Libraries, opportunities to teach empathy and build relationships and bring people who are believing things that are fake back in, instead of making them feel singled out, bringing them back into our sense of community. And an example I think a great one, I'm really excited about this, it's not happening until 2024, is through the Smithsonian Museum, we are gonna, which is a big like national level museum here, we're gonna have I can't think of the word, an installation, like an art installation on bias. So it's gonna talk about how people perceive people differently, if they look differently than them and things like that. And it's going to help us in some ways teach these skills as well. So that's going to be a huge thing that we're going to get a lot of people walking in our doors for. And it'll again help give us the opportunity to tie back to media literacy. So think about how you guys can do this in your libraries and what you can do in what you're already doing, what's popular for you, change it a little bit, add a little bit to talk about media literacy. And my final slide is a slide of resources. These are things that we've used to develop the original manual that we did for the American Library Association, as well as the news landscape in America and other work that was done that could potentially help as well. So these are all written in English, but I'm sure they will translate into your language. Or I hope that you have resources available that are similar to these as well, that will give you the tools and the foundation to move into what you need. So that's the end of what we have to say, but we have 20 minutes left. So if there is time and you allow, we would love to answer questions for you.
Рахмет.
Thank you, Amber, Kristen. Thank you again. We have a lot of comments in our chat section. Some of them joined us a bit later, but most of them are saying that it was very beneficial for them in general. We're going to say that we will publish this video of this meeting in our YouTube channel, and you can watch it a bit later as well. I would like to thank Amber and Kristen for joining us in such an early time of the morning. And also I would like to thank the interpreters for the hard work, because this topic is a bit new for a lot of people. And I think that our participants received enough information about the media literacy, because in the very beginning we had a survey when 90% of our participants mentioned that they don't have enough information about the media literacy in general. And that's why I would like again to thank for Amber and Christian, and for the also people giving thanks to US Embassy in Kazakhstan representatives for the organization of such a meeting. And also we have a question here for the speakers. I would like to read it for you.
Либо стажировки. Можем ли мы от вас получить приглашение для обмена опытом? Егер Америка барып, не болмаса Америка кітапханашылар қауымдастығынан солай
кәсіби have an
шақыру алуға бола ма? Осы жағынан сізге сұрақ Эмбер.
Bibagol, this is Michael. I think we kind of lost the English interpretation of your question. If they could repeat that.
Қайталайын ба сұрағымды? Можно ли получить приглашение на повышение квалификации?
Can we receive an invitation for the programs
the question
of
is
advanced
about whether the question to Amber is, are there any opportunities for librarians from Kazakhstan to come for internships in the US or any special trainings in the US? Are there any open invitation for those special programs?
Actually, I'm going to defer this question to Michael. I think he might have more information about that. He's the International Chapter Relations Chair for the American Library Association.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Yeah, as you said, that's what you refer to other folks if you're not the expert. So right now we don't have anything specific as far as opportunities that are available, but we do from time to time. There are grants that happen, and some of our ALA divisions have scholarships for free courses that people can take virtually. And occasionally we do work with the U.S. State Department and others for grants for people to come to the U.S. to do short exchanges. Right now, I don't have anything. We don't have any specific program, but obviously when you see 700 people on a webinar, there's a lot of interest in interactions between the U.S. and Kazakhstan. And I think this bodes well for us to then try to work on that. So thank the person for that question. And we'll certainly try to keep working on that to make those opportunities happen.
Еще один вопрос. Интересуется, получает ли
One more question.
сообщество, которое организует обучение медиаграмотности, какое целевое финансирование?
Do the libraries receive targeted funding for development and implementation of media literacy programs?
Повторить вопрос. Получают ли
Do libraries and staff of the library or the association of the libraries that do programs focused on media literacy, do they receive funding? Where does the funding come from for those programs?
I can share from my library. We have not received any special funding for just media literacy programming. I come from a smaller library system, much smaller than Kristen's, and we haven't done as much, nearly as much as she has at Dallas. But our programs are part of our regular programming schedule that we do. We integrate the principles in to regular programming. So we do have a budget for programs, but we don't have a budget specifically for media literacy programs. Kristen?
Same. We have a programming budget, which is actually supported through our Friends of the Library group, not even through our city budget. And it's not specifically for media literacy principles, it's just for general programming. And a lot of what we have done through these partnerships, like I talked about with creating our own newspaper and the Big D reads, the community-wide read, and those sort of things, we were able to do without either they helped support it, like they paid for the resources needed, or it didn't really cost us anything in any way. So we were able to like bring in the PEN America, the media literacy experts and things like that without any cost to us.
Еще один вопрос задали по поводу квалификации специалистов.
One more question regarding, so what should be the qualification of specialists or the special training background or skills or knowledge of specialists that train others in media literacy? So who can train others in media literacy? What skills and knowledge set or background should a person have to be able to teach and train others in media literacy?
I'll say for me, I had no special background or training in media literacy before I started working with the American Library Association in 2019 on it. We were brought in for a project to talk about how public libraries in the United States could share media literacy principles essentially. And they wanted people on that who worked in all different types of public library settings. Like Amber mentioned, we work in different types of public libraries. We have very different communities that our libraries are representative of. And so there were librarians from all over the United States and working in different roles in public libraries as well as academic libraries. And there were folks representing the media there too together. So we came together and we decided on a definition we could all agree on of what exactly media literacy was even, and then sort of wrote this practitioner's guide on it. And through that experience, I became an expert. I don't know, sometimes I don't think I'm an expert, but I guess I know more than most people. So in media literacy, and realized how important it is to share with the people that I work with who are on the public service desk every day. And realize, because I want them to share those principles with the people that they see on a regular basis. And that's where it came into play in programming as well, was how can one of my roles is to oversee programming at our central library and at our branch libraries too, really. So trying to have an influence on that. So I don't think I think you need to have the interest in it and take the time to learn about it. And then you can be that person that does that in your library. I don't know if you have more to add, Amber.
I think Kristen explained that very well. In the US, we usually have a librarian with a master's degree, but not every librarian has a person with a master's degree at their library. But even people with that training don't necessarily have training about this, which is why the American Library Association started this project to start with, because they recognize that we are all out here serving people and we need to learn more about it. So that's when they pulled together the team of librarians and media experts from around the country to develop this webinar series that you're receiving, and to develop a guide of just tools and ideas for staff and libraries around the country and now around the world to be able to share, to learn for ourselves what we need to know to be able to guide our staff and guide our patrons in the right direction. So this truly has been something that we've all been learning as we go.
Спасибо, рахмет, Эмбер, Кристин, рахмет. Тағы бір сұрақтар туындап
Thank you very much. And we have more questions. What about school libraries? And what is the connection with the school libraries and the media literacy? So can you make clear this question?
I guess I can start. It seems like we're going to take turns, which is good. The school libraries, they do operate separately from public libraries. So I don't work with the kids in the schools that much, but in my conversations with colleagues who do, media literacy skills are very much a part of their lesson plans when they work with students in their schools. It's not just teaching students how to find a book in the library. They are very focused on teaching them how to evaluate information, how all the different methods that they use to do that, the different techniques and exercises, I'm not totally sure. Kristen and I were focusing our work on adults. So I unfortunately don't have a lot of examples for you with that, but I know that in the schools, it is something that they recognize as a need. It's like I showed you in those, the studies from earlier, it was very sad to see how the younger adults were the ones who had the worst skills. And so I think our school librarians are playing catch up now to get people to better be able to evaluate the information they're receiving online.
And my experience is very much the same as Amber's here. I found that it varies a lot across the United States, and all of our school districts are very individualized by maybe county or just small cities or something throughout different states in the United States. So curriculum at all of those schools is different and based on state, and then there might, there's really not a lot of national curriculum or anything, but most of what I know is from speaking with school librarians that are colleagues of mine or friends of mine, and seeing how they have integrated those principles, like through those digital citizenship classes and things like that, into what they're teaching students and what they're learning when they come into the library in the schools. And when I did, when I taught this, media literacy workshop basically to our public service staff at Dallas Public Library, I did an informal poll to see how many, because a lot of them are younger than me, how many of them are coming in and had learned those things in school, since social media and smart devices and computers had been a part of their life growing up where they hadn't been in mine. And it seemed like it was about half and half. So it seemed like about 50% of those students had gotten that information in school in some way, and some of them still had not. So as Amber said, it's something that is still being integrated into curriculum, and that we're still learning how to share these things with people and help them understand how they're thinking about this. And I think truly, I hope it becomes something that is more heavily integrated into all of education as we move forward.
Рахмет, әрине келісеміз.
Thank you. Of course, we agree that the future of every country depends on the youth, and every country should be active in providing support for young generation in that issue. The next question is that in your presentation you mentioned that in USA you have the newspaper. Do you have any reports afterwards? I mean, if you publish it, and do you have to give any reports to any bodies I mean, official bodies in your state in general after publishing this newspaper?
Kristen, I think that was about yours.
Like the newspaper we made in the program? No, we didn't have to tell anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
About
okay.
your
No, we did not have to tell anybody or anything like that. It wasn't it was something that we gave out to people, but we're able to do that without having to without any oversight at any level. If anybody can walk onto the street and give out a flyer on something or something they're calling a newspaper without any type of credibility to what they're doing or any type of knowledge or background or anything. So what we were doing was trying to help people see that and also see what goes into creating a factual news and article or something like that, and finding correct sources and why you should trust certain types of media over other types of media that aren't credible. So no, we did not have to register it though in any way.
Thanks again. And the next question, we have lack of time, only 2 minutes. Other questions, of course, we will try to send them to the email of Amber and Christian afterwards, and then we will share the responses with. And in the presentation you mentioned, Amber, I think you mentioned that you mentioned that National Association of Education. You told that you have a National Association on Media Literacy, and can you clarify on this a bit, please? What is the function of this organization?
Okay. Yes, it's the National Association for Media Literacy Education. It is a group of people from all different fields who have identified the problem of a lack of media literacy education in our society. And they have come together to look at how far the problem extends and how to solve it from their different perspectives. So they have people from many different fields: healthcare, education, the news media, libraries. There's so many different concerns that these people have based on the roles that they play with their job. And so this is really important because it shows it. For one thing, you have better ideas and better solutions when you have more perspectives at the table, so you get a better picture of what the problem actually is. But they're able to be trusted because they don't represent one particular viewpoint. It's not a group of liberals saying everybody else needs to do better. It's completely separated from any kind of political bias. It's strictly coming from where people's professional opinions lead them into understanding the nature of the problem and where we need to do better with educating people about media literacy. I hope that helped.
Рахмет, Эмбер. Еще один.
Thanks, Amber.
Ну, конечно, вот он связан, вытекает непосредственно из предыдущего.
So last question comes from the previous one. So I'm sure that this work in training in media literacy, it involves a lot of volunteers. So how is it going with involving volunteers in this kind of work? Do people happily volunteer when you talk about media literacy and helping others get more literate in media?
Except for external groups, like the one we worked with to make the newspaper, we haven't used a lot of volunteers for these. I could see like when we have a program, we might use volunteers to help create the resources for the program or to help us run the program or something like that. But that would just be the general need for volunteers and asking people to help versus it being specifically about media literacy. So I haven't really run into that in any way, like of having to get people to specifically help with something just pertaining to media literacy. That was a volunteer. But I will say since 2020, when we reopened to the public in May of 2021, so it's been about a year and a half that we've been open and to the public again, we've had a hard time rebuilding our volunteer program post COVID-19 essentially though. So I think maybe that might be a part of it too. We just haven't had a lot of as many volunteers overall in the last year and a half.
My experience has been very similar to Kristen's. I really don't have much more to add to that. We do have library program volunteers, but they aren't the ones that are working on planning the programs or integrating the media literacy principles in. That's more led by the staff.
Рахмет. Эмбер, у вас уже, по-моему, горло подводит. Мы беседуем чуть больше 2 часов.
Amber, I know it's been taxing on your throat. You've been talking for 2 hours. I want to thank again our dear speakers, our participants. Really appreciated a very informative, great webinar. We had a lot of positive comments. Our participants shared in the comments that you use clear language, shared from your experience, even gave us many interesting examples that clarified some of the things, and that it was very pleasant to listen to you. Also, your fun and creative ways to teach media literacy, especially for involve younger people and engage younger people. It was really interesting to hear those examples. Young people, they love fun things, you know, they love pranks and, you know, solving true crimes and other things. And so all of our participants, thank you for an interesting webinar, and want to see you in the future webinars and continue learning from you in the next year. So I hope we meet again and learn even more from you and learn from your vast experience in media literacy. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Wish you good health, wish you successful programs, wish you good fruit of your work.
Вебинарға қатысып, аяғына дейін отырғандарыңызға, сұрақтарыңызға, берілмеген сұрақтарға соңыратамын енді
We will try to send an answers to you afterwards. We'll share the link of this meeting in our YouTube channel. Thank you very much again, and goodbye. This is the end of our webinar.